Okay, there we are.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my 6th episode of Live with Gregory Pappas. I'm very honored today to have with me two individuals who command tremendous respect, not only in their own communities, but in the halls of power of Washington, D.C.
Aram, do you hear me?
Perfectly.
Capital
there we are.
Countries around the world. Aram, Endy, can you both hear me?
I hear you. Sorry for any technical glitches.
That's okay. It's a live show, and I think everybody understands that we're doing lives here, and this is all very new to us. I'm here with two very noteworthy individuals who share many common distinctions of being leaders in their respective communities, of being well-respected leaders in Washington, D.C., in other great cities and capitals across the world. But there is one distinction, I think, that, I don't know, I makes me kind of chuckle and laugh a little bit. I follow the media of a lot of foreign countries because of the work I do with the Pappas Post. And I follow the Turkish media too, because we have a very important, sizable Greek community in Turkey. And I saw yesterday that the president of Turkey labeled the two of you on his list of evil forces that are out to destroy the country. Before we talk about President Erdogan's inclusion of the two fine individuals on this list of evil forces, which I also used Google Translate. I think he blamed you guys a little bit for the coronavirus too in the country. That was part of the whole thing. I have with me today Aram Hamparian, the Executive Director of the Armenian National Committee of America. In his role, he serves as the National Advocacy Organization's point person with the administration, with Congress, the media in Washington, D.C., and the entire foreign policy community, which includes think tanks and other individuals and institutions, in cooperation with an expansive grassroots network of regional offices and more than 50 local chapters, dozens and dozens of coalition partners. I might add also Kim Kardashian. I'm joking. We'll talk about her later.
Hundreds of joke. It's real. It's true.
I saw her lighting a candle in Armenia a couple of years ago. So we're going to ask Aram about that. But Aram, you work daily with a broad range of legislative policy, research, political, campaign, media, coalition, community-related concerns. I've seen you testify before Congress. I've seen you in numerous foreign policy discussions. And you are the voice of the Armenian American community, especially when it comes to political issues. On the other hand, your partner in crime here and your fellow member of the evil empire that's out to destroy Turkey, according to the good president. I have with me somebody that I've been in the trenches with for many, many, many years when I lived in Chicago. Endy Zemenides is the founder and executive director of the Hellenic American Leadership Council. Prior to joining HALC, Endy spent over a decade at the intersection of policy and politics. He practiced law in Chicago, specializing in municipal law and government relations. He served as a senior advisor to the Illinois State Treasurer, Alexei Giannoulias, who was also a Democratic candidate for Senate. Endy serves as a non-resident fellow at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, where he had previously been an emerging leader fellow. Endy's policy experience also includes participation in the Aspen Institute's Socrates program, service on the editorial board and board of advisors of the National Strategy Forum, and lecturing in international relations and American foreign policy at DePaul University's Political Science Department. He currently serves on the board of directors of numerous organizations, including College Year in Athens, the University of Chicago Booth School of Business's Civic Scholars Program, Advisory Committee. He went to school in Chicago, got his law degree at Georgetown, but I think Endy's real credibility and real credentials come from his decades of working on the streets. He's been there. He's been at the community level, at the grassroots level. He's taken a lot of hits and a lot of punches from all sides of the spectrum. And I think what excites me about having this conversation with both of you is the passion that both of you bring to this. And it's not so much, and this is something I want to discern, especially to my audience before we commence. Both of you come to this conversation not representing Greece, Cyprus, and Armenia. And I think that's critical because I think in years past, we called ourselves the Greek lobby as if we were representing a foreign country. You probably had this, Aram, in your community too, where you were dealing with second and third and fourth generation people saying, I'm an American. Why should I join this Armenian organization and encourage the lobbying of my government for the Armenian, these foreign principles? And Andy, you do the same thing. I deal with it on a daily basis. I think what's exciting about the work both of you are doing and have done is both the Armenian National Committee of America and the Hellenic American Leadership Council do not represent the interests of foreign countries. You very much represent the interests and ideals of the United States of America. We demand the rule of law. We demand, we have certain expectations of our allies globally. And everything that I've ever seen come out of HALC and ANCA has not been representing a foreign government. It's been representing the ideals, the policies that the United States of America should be upholding. So with that, I congratulate both of you, and I congratulate the work that you've done. I do want to talk to you about the Grassroots Initiative. We'll get to them along the way in my questioning. But before I start with my questions, I think it's important. We've got hundreds of people online already. Many people are looking forward to this discussion. We have just experienced, or we are in the middle of a global pandemic. How are you and your family holding up? How are you doing? Aram, you're in Washington. What's it like in Washington, D.C.?
It's fine. I mean, we're healthy, thank God. And I see a lot of folks out on the street. I think people are kind of hungry to get outside. There are others, I think, who kind of don't mind being inside. So I think we're kind of seeing a bit of a divide, I think, personality-wise. But I think everything, thank God, is moving in the right direction, and our family is safe and sound.
Andy?
Thankfully, again, and I'm glad to hear all of you are doing well, but I am doing well, but we're the fortunate ones, right? We kind of have first world problems. Our days and our lives are a little bit disrupted, but we're safe. We have access to food, to medicine. We have family nearby, and that's why it's even more important for us to remember those who don't. And Greg, you've written and spoken about random acts of kindness, and I think that's more important than ever. Check in on a neighbor. Check in on an elderly relative who you know doesn't have family nearby. That's more important than ever.
Yeah, thank you both. And I think I also want to add too how we've all adjusted to this. And I do want to give a little bit of credit where credit is due. I was inspired to start my series Live with Gregory Pappas because I saw all of the amazing work that the Hellenic American Leadership Council was doing. I mean, you almost immediately pivoted to this online platform and started some very informative Facebook Lives. You've had authors, you've had journalists, you've had political people, and it's really been a tremendous tarea or syndrofia. I don't know how to say that in Armenian, Aram, but I've had company online with me. And it was Endy's work with the Hellenic American Leadership Council that really inspired me, and I think inspired a lot of people, because HALC was one of the first organizations to start these regular Facebook chats. Then all of a sudden we saw the great work that the Greek Orthodox metropolis of Chicago started doing. I started my series as a result. Endy, I don't know if they've given you the credit for starting the spark that started it all, but I definitely do. I was watching all of your great work, and in typical Greek fashion, I said, well, I'm going to do it too, and I'm going to make it better. I'm just kidding.
Well, thank you, but it is, and this is something that again, going to our partnership with Aram, we've done this before. We've done, I think at least once every couple months, we're on a podcast together. We've done Facebook Live from Sheridan Circle together, from Capitol Hill together. What you said about Barea, or building a sense of a community, that's again more necessary than ever. But it won't stop with this. These virtual tools, they're not a substitute for anything, but they're a tool, and we should make the greatest use of them that we can.
Yeah. So, guys, today we're going to dive right in and talk about the elephant in the room, and that elephant in the room is and I have to differentiate something with both of you, and you both may agree or disagree. I love Turkey. I love the country. It was Greek for thousands of years. There's a tremendous heritage and history there. I used to love visiting the city of Istanbul. It's the seat of our Orthodox Church. It's the leadership that I have a real problem with right now. And I hate to judge a nation on its leadership, especially with what we're experiencing today in this country. I don't want to be judged by the actions of my leaders, just like I don't know that the entire Turkish nation or Turkish culture. Yeah, we've got some serious problems in the country's history. I mean, we have a genocide that was perpetrated. But I always want to differentiate that I don't have anything against the people of Turkey. I love visiting the city of Istanbul. I think it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Seeing the Hagia Sophia, and just reminding the world of what this great city gave the world. It's the president of Turkey, and it's the policies of this authoritarian regime that I at least am differentiating against. And I think that's the work that you guys are doing too. It's easy today to talk about Turkey and to be critical of Turkey. The critics of Turkey have multiplied. It's a stark difference to what was going on in our country 10 years ago, when we kept hearing the same song and dance that Turkey was the ally of the West, and Turkey was going to be this beacon of democracy in the Middle East, and we needed to support Turkey. At the end of President Obama's term, ANCA and HALC both went out on a limb, and you opposed legislation that had the support of both the White House and congressional Republican leaders. You teamed up with others to defeat it was called the Indian Tribal Trade and Investment Demonstration Project Act of 2011. See, I did my homework. I did my research. And then at the very end of Obama's first term, you worked to block the transfer of naval frigates to Turkey. This was, I think, the beginning of a really important partnership. And I'd like to hear from both of you. You made some waves in your respective communities also. I think you angered some people in your respective community, and it took bold organization on your part. So, Endy, first you, and then I'll let Aram talk. I want to talk about the beginning of this partnership and how I think it kicked off in 2011 with blocking these frigates from going to Turkey.
Yeah. 11 and 12, and it was, like you said, it wasn't the popular thing to do. Turkey was still the golden child in Washington, in Brussels. Unfortunately, even in our community, there were some major institutions that were giving awards to Erdogan's ministers then. But there was a point where we felt it went too far. This Indian Tribal Trade Act would have given Turkish companies, not Turkish American, Turkish companies, special investment rights on federal lands here, or Indian Native American lands. This was a part of a phenomenal PR effort by Turkey, who had convinced many Indian tribes that they were actually Turkish, that they both descended from the same Central Asian tribes. And it was also a great rallying point where several Greek American organizations spoke up at that point, several Armenian organizations. I think I really enjoy working with Aram and see him as a role model, because they're a little more combative, and he can talk about his arrest record, but the, but I think a real tipping point came with the naval frigates, right? And I will tie that to what you started off with, which is Erdogan calling out the Greek and Armenian lobbies, because we got called out in Turkish newspapers for that. This was a situation at a time, and you got to remember, this was at the time of the fiscal cliff. This is when Obama and Eric Cantor were like almost death enemies. They couldn't agree on anything, but they could agree to let these frigates be transferred. And they put it on an agenda around Christmas time, thinking nobody was going to pay attention. We paid attention, and they put it on the full House floor, thinking that there would be no debate. We made sure there was a debate, and on the last day of that Congress, a senator from Illinois, Mark Kirk, put a block on it and killed it. But you're right. It was not. It was swimming against the current. It was not necessarily popular. But sometimes you've got to put up the fight. That's what I've learned from working with Aram.
Yeah, as have we, Greg. I mean, that's the lessons I think have gone both ways. When I think about our communities, I think of basically as maybe two different communities, but one cause. And the dividing line is actually very hard to identify. It's like hard to know where the Greek American lobby begins and where the Armenian American lobby ends. It's like it's all part of a continuum, and there's really I see us as one family, and I think and we act upon that and act in that way. I think every single day. I would say talk about the frigates and the Indian tribal bill as efforts to bring some sanity or to restore some common sense to the U.S.-Turkey relationship. It had gone off the rails to the point where Turkey had a free pass, a blank check to do anything, to get any weapon system, to perform any act of regional aggression or domestic abuse, and with absolutely no consequence in Washington. And what we've done, and this was really like an epic, like tectonic shift of American bilateral ties with Turkey, is to put them back on a track where people can make intelligent, reasoned judgments. Now, those judgments aren't always going to be what we want, right? We're not going to get all of the U.S.-Turkey relationship to be what Endy and I might draft up. But at least now they're part of legitimate debate and discussion. They're not deals are not cut behind closed doors at the Defense Department or the National Security Council. But now Congress and the administration have to sort of deal with Turkey on its own terms, and we can live with that. That's like we like, for example, give an example. Last year, we can talk about this later in more depth, but last year the House recognized the genocide of Christians in the late Ottoman period, and that's like a reasonable judgment, but a reasonable judgment that never would have happened if we hadn't beaten back that Turkish veto over a U.S. policy. Once Turkey's veto got rejected, then the Congress could vote, and when they had a chance to vote, they voted like 99% for the truth. And I think that's the contribution we made to American policy. We've brought some sanity and reason back to the U.S.-Turkey relationship.
So I do have some additional questions too about the No Jets for Turkey campaign and so on. But you mentioned something, Aram, that I want to pivot to, because I think that this is really what unites our two communities, and our two communities are united by a common history, and it's not a common history as in you experience this and we experience something similar. We experience the same thing. In many ways, you guys have done a great job in branding, if you will, the Armenian genocide. We in the Greek community haven't done such a good job. We still have a lot of different factions, a lot of different groups that like to call it their own. We haven't been able to settle on a historical. We've got some people talking about 1914. We've got some people talking about 1922. We've got a very good and active vocal Pontian community that are talking about the Pontian genocide. We haven't yet been able to put it all under one umbrella and call it the Greek genocide. But the truth is, this was a single act of genocide that at the time the officials in Turkey perpetrated against all Christians at the time. So this wasn't just about the Armenians. And kudos to you guys for picking this up, calling it the Armenian genocide, and running with it and getting it recognized in Congress and so on. This is what unites us. I've read many accounts of, books of Armenian survivors whose neighbors were Greek, who hid a Greek family, who ran with a Greek family, or I've read many good Greek-themed books who remember running with their Armenian neighbors. So this was the Christian community in Turkey that was subject to this genocide and to these atrocities. So I think that's why it's special that I've got the two of you on this screen, not because, we both shared this experience. We had this experience together. Aram, I want to talk a little bit about, this has been your struggle, the torch that you've been carrying for a very, very long time. And you accomplished something great last year with getting 99.9% of the US Congress, but we still haven't been able to get a United States president to acknowledge, and I've got a twofold question. And I want to be fair, because people are going to say, well, Trump didn't do it, and you had a big press release last year. Obama promised and never delivered either. So this is an administration issue across the board. Talk to me a little bit about the genocide effort, why it's important to have this recognized as genocide by the President of the United States, by the Congress, what it means to the average rank and file, Armenian American, Greek American, and why you've put so much time, effort, and energy in this.
Okay, so it's an excellent question. Let me just move to get off of Obama and Trump. I'll just address that quickly, then get to the kind of meat of the question. Obama's failing was that he promised to recognize the Armenian genocide and then went totally back upon his word. That is his, betrayal.
So we just lost Aram. He'll probably be back. We have a technical issue.
So I'll give you a little bit of a.
We got him. Let me get you back. Aram, here we go. We lost Aram.
Guys. Okay, so Trump made a promise and betrayed that promise. Trump promised to be an America First president and to stand up for the rights of Christians abroad, and ultimately fell short in that way. They're both different, but they both have fallen short. When we talk about genocide, and we've talked about it now for more than half a century, we usually frame it in terms of truth and recognition. That's like our what we talk about, because those are the next steps we want in the American political context. But ultimately, we want truth and we want recognition of the truth because we want the remedies that flow from recognition. We want the reparations, we want the justice, we want to address issues of land and property and compensation, to restore to the Armenian nation, but all the nations who suffered, that which was taken. Endy is a great lawyer, and he knows that the idea of making the victim whole is central to justice. What can be returned should be returned. What cannot be returned should be compensated. So I'll speak for the Armenians. We were on this land for 7,000 plus years, had developed elements of viability, defensible borders, agricultural resources, access to the water, all these various elements that contributed to Armenia's survivability. And many of those, in fact, most of those were ripped from us in 1915, and we think those should be restored. And the argument we get at the State Department and National Security Council sometimes is, well, how is it that you folks could expect that there are consequences today for something that happened a century ago? And our answer very simply is, there have been consequences every day for the last 100 years. They've simply all been borne by the victim, right? The razed churches, certainly the loss of lives, all these things have fallen upon the shoulders of those who were victimized. It's now time for the perpetrator to bear some of the consequences as well.
And Aram makes allusion to consequences. I would say that the legacy of the genocide lives on, right? We can talk our community, and Greg, you know very well the status of the ecumenical patriarch. In the Armenian patriarch, we just saw recently Turkey interfere with the selection who the Armenian patriarch is. The raised churches, the closed orphanages, the closed Halki seminary, and beyond just what our two communities and what Christianity in Turkey suffers. Everybody should go look at the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom their report on Turkey, recommending that Turkey should be classified as one of the worst violators of religious freedom in the world. Now, over years, it was about what they were doing to Christian Armenians and Christian Hellenes, both in Turkey and in Cyprus. But for the first time, the report on Turkey included a critique of what Turkey's effect on Christianity in Syria is. All right, ISIS. There's a direct line between the Christian genocides that we're talking about and getting recognition for, and what ISIS is doing in Mosul and in Syria. And the fact is, if we are, as world citizens, as human beings, if we're ever going to be serious about never again, the only way you're going to do that is if you acknowledge what happened in the first place, right? Germany right now, people look at Germany. This is a Germany that in the lives of our parents was responsible for the Holocaust. And today Germany is looked at as perhaps, with the withdrawal of the United States, the leader of the Western world. Okay? That would have never happened if they were not honest about what they did in the Holocaust, made up for it, and did a complete 180.
Yeah. Now, Endy, I'm going to offer a thought on that, and it's going to speak to a little bit of what you had shared, Greg, at the beginning. And we may agree or disagree on this, but I think it's an interesting point to discuss. Germany changed at the level of its elite and its governance, but also there was an education effort to bring along the population.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as our issue is certainly with the Turkish government and official Turkish policy, let's not lose sight of the fact that that policy in many ways reflects the views of the population. I'll give two American examples. Americans watched Westerns for, how decades and decades that demonized Native Americans. Not because some producer or director wanted to foster hatred of Native Americans, but because the population had to internalize that narrative. And it was then reflected in films and in terms of U.S. policy and broken treaties and things of that sort. Slavery and Jim Crow were not just elite policies, sadly, but policies that were shared by parts of the population. And so certainly our issue is not with the people, and we can never generalize. And there are people within Turkey who are literally heroic, people who are ethnically Turkish, but who take a risk to their lives in ways that we never have to, by speaking truthfully about the past of the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the birth of the Republic. So there's great people. We should never generalize. But there is some work to be done at the level of society. And for example, essays should not be written as a prerequisite for graduation about why the minorities betrayed the Turks around the First World War. And if you read the textbooks, they just reinforce all the worst elements. Now that's not necessarily the fault of a school child, of course not. But the society also has to at some point reckon with this, maybe parallel to the state. And here's a question that I guess we can all discuss: is who's going to drive the process more? Is this a top-down process where the state repents and brings the society along, or will this be the society driving change at the state level? Garo Paylan, who's an Armenian, who's in the Turkish parliament, a great, heroic, courageous man, says that it's going to be a bottom-up thing, that when Turkish society is more democratic, then they will be able to deal with their past. And it's an open discussion, of course.
Well, I think Aram, history shows us. I mean, Greg started with the critique of Erdogan, but I think history shows us that it necessarily has to be from the bottom up. It was the CHP, which is now the liberal opposition, that closed down Halki. It was the CHP that invaded Cyprus, and there has not been really. I mean, there was this period of earthquake diplomacy that had a lot of promise, at least between Greece and Turkey. But this is why we should care about a real democracy, real freedom of speech. That someone who speaks about the Armenian genocide is not labeled an enemy of the state. Someone who speaks about the Greek genocide, and this is why we really should care about a truly democratic Turkey. The failings, especially here in Washington, Greg, and I think Aram can echo this, is that the U.S. will keep pretending that Turkey is more democratic than it is. Will excuse everything as part of the process of turning Turkey to the West. And even if Turkey's not turning, they'll still find something to give them credit for. It's astounding to me the amount of, and this is not only in the circle of diplomats, because diplomats have to deal with the world as they have it, not necessarily as a world that they like it, but there's thought leaders, there's think tankers who still are sitting there bending over backwards for Erdogan, which I believe makes a democratic Turkey that much more difficult to achieve.
So, Endy, you brought up freedom of speech and things like that. And somebody just got an email. I do want to read something from a press release that the Armenian National Committee of America released in April on the 105th anniversary. We're talking about freedom of speech and democracy in Turkey, but ANCA here has shown us that perhaps we have to look at what's happening right in our own country. Aram, I'm referring to the press release about the President Trump tightens Turkey's grip over White House policy. And this was shocking to me to read this. And I quote the press release: Armenian genocide denial is a policy manufactured in Ankara, exported to America, and enforced in Washington, D.C. by President Trump. And this is a direct quote from you. Once again, President Trump copied and pasted the transparently euphemistic, patently offensive April 24th evasions issued by Barack Obama and his other predecessors, essentially isolating his administration as the last major American co-conspirator in Turkey's obstruction of justice for the Armenian genocide. These are some pretty harsh words.
Yeah, it's 105 years. Our patience is at its end. The best test of this proposition would be something like, well, what would American leaders do absent a Turkish veto? Let's say they set as a premise, we will set our own policy, we will study our own archive, we will draw our own conclusions about the law and the history and the facts in this case. Well, we had that proposition was tested last October and last December in the House and Senate. And when Speaker Pelosi and Bob Menendez were able to get votes of the House and Senate, the House passed it 405 to 11. The 11 who voted no were like outliers who were just mad at the American politics of it. They did not call to doubt the Armenian genocide at all. The Senate was 100 to 0. The White House would do the same thing. If we, let's say tomorrow, Turkey said, we have no more objection to this issue. We no longer consider this a political issue. Do as you please, America. America would, within 5 minutes, they would recognize the Armenian genocide. So I think it's pretty easily provable, or you can easily demonstrate that this is in fact a foreign policy. It's a true foreign policy. Foreign authors, but American enforcement. And that's bad. It's not just bad for Armenians and Greeks, it's offensive, but it's bad for America. It's bad whether you're dealing with China or Saudi Arabia. The idea that foreign countries can exercise their leverage and their lobbyists to write American laws is like a travesty. And when we end those gag rules, we're doing a service for America. Like, America should be able to speak with an American voice on any issue. And I think we're freeing America in some way from this foreign influence.
And I'd like to point out too, Aram, because you talked about the congressional resolutions, but 49 out of 50 states in the United States have passed an Armenian genocide resolution. So you have 49 out of 50 states. I'm not sure the last time we've had 49 out of 50 states even approve an amendment. For people, just since we're Americans, just think of this. The Bill of Rights, the Constitution itself, was ratified with less consensus than the consensus on the Armenian genocide. 100 to nothing in the Senate. I'm not even sure Israel gets 100 to nothing anymore. 403 or 405 to 11 on the genocide resolution. When's the last time you saw that in Congress? So I think Aram's proposition holds true in so many ways.
Well, Endy, this is important as well, that the HALC and ANCA have worked very hard to never write off any votes and to never take any votes for granted, and to never, and I'll be very blunt here, to never let our issues get instrumentalized by others, right? We're American stakeholders as much as anybody else. Now, the left and the right, the conservatives and liberals and all the rest obviously have their interests, and that's perfectly fine. But when and they'll try very often, it's just their nature to kind of co-opt issues and turn them into a partisan bludgeon against the other side. But we've always held firm, and we've sent the message to Washington that we take ourselves seriously. God damn it, you better take us seriously as well. And if you push us and you test us, you'll see how tough we are. We are not here for anybody but ourselves. We have paid our dues over more than a century. We have fought in American wars. We have paid our share of taxes. We have, God knows how many patents and discoveries the Greeks and Armenians have brought to the American economy. Like, we are full stakeholders, and our issues are our issues. We own them, and nobody else. And I think that is really good. If groups that do that in Washington earn the respect, they also earn enemies, but they earn the respect of this city, and then you get things done. If we had chosen to let these issues get sort of adopted or co-opted by one side or the other, then on any given day we might win a narrow victory. We might win, by the skin of our teeth with a narrow majority, but that's not what we want. We want to bring America with us in the right direction.
So, and in that same vein, I want to talk a little bit about another joint project that you guys worked on. And I hadn't been following the news, and all of a sudden I turn the page of the New York Times and I see this giant full-page ad that said worst ally ever, and I believe it was for the No Jets for Turkey campaign. You guys smartly hashtagged it, and it immediately went viral. I want to talk about that campaign. I want to talk about what that meant. I don't think that the average Greek American, the average Armenian American that is raising a family, that wants to have a roof over their head, a job, and a nice church to go to, and a nice school to make sure their kids learn the language. I don't think they truly understand what is going on in the halls of power, and that our government is selling and buying and doing these deals. So that's why I want you to dumb down a little bit this No Jets for Turkey campaign. I wanted you to explain to me and why it took an ad in the New York Times that, Endy, I don't know if Aram was mocked, but you certainly were. But it sure paid off in the end, didn't it? I mean, doing the unpopular thing at the time certainly showed that it was the right thing to do.
So, as a general proposition, I'll let Aram talk about the specific No Jets for Turkey. The decisions, I think we've learned this too with this COVID crisis. There is no such thing as over there anymore, or back then, right? The decisions that are made in foreign policy, and especially who we are allied with and who we listen to, come back to haunt us. We had the wrong people advising, the wrong Iraqis advising President Bush at the start of the Iraq War, and we paid for it with thousands of U.S. lives, American lives, and trillions of American dollars. This issue, the F-35s, and down to the proposition, why should a Greek American who maybe doesn't have family in Greece, is multiple generations involved, somebody who sees themselves more as American of Hellenic descent rather than part of the Greek diaspora, why should they care? There is a historic proposition that has been proven over and over again, that when the U.S. and Greece are fighting together, are on the same side, it's been better for both countries. World War I, World War II, right? The war against terror. I could go on and on. The fight for a free and united Europe, all of it. In this particular case, the F-35, we were outsourcing, just like we let Turkey veto American free speech, we were outsourcing American national security on the premise that this is a loyal and reliable ally, right? And they are neither. But we made assumptions. I'll put in my critique of President Obama, right? His tagline was hope, and I think when it came to Turkey, he attributed hope to what Turkey could become. And as the saying goes, hope is not a strategy, and it was proven again with Turkey. But they got the F-35, and then all of a sudden, that wasn't enough for them. They wanted the Patriots, and they didn't just want to buy the Patriots; they wanted the technology for the Patriots. And at that point, the Obama administration said, no, So Turkey, to play hardball, went and got the S-400s. Why should we care? Is this just something for secretaries of state and secretaries of defense?
And the
It's not.
S-400s are Russian missiles.
The S-400s are Russian, and the S-400s were meant to shoot down American F-16s, right? That should be a special concern to Greeks because the Greek Air Force is F-16s. The Aegean is being guarded with F-16s. The S-400s, remember, but the S-400s had no capability against F-35s. If you let Russian S-400s being used to train on F-35s, they're incompatible, but the Russians will get the technology on how to counter a stealth jet, our next generation, and that makes America less secure. When we fight, we're not anti-anything, and we can talk about later. I like you. I don't hate Turkey, but there's a lot more work to be done than just a new leader coming on in Erdogan. But we're not anti-Turkey. We're pro-Hellenic. We want Turkey to turn to the West because one way or another, even if Turkey left NATO, they're still Greece's neighbor. They're Cyprus's neighbor. They're Armenia's neighbor. So we want Turkey to turn to the West. But a pro-Hellenic means that Athens and Washington are fundamentally on the same side. Washington and Nicosia are fundamentally on the same side. They're working for stability. They're working for prosperity. They're working for democracy. You know, when we were in college, it was the democratic peace theory that full democracies don't go to war with each other. That's what we want for everybody. Be a full democracy. There is a question of joint prosperity. I think that's a way for all of us to come together. But the F-35 was a test of that proposition. Do you make yourself and your nation and your manufacturing base, by the way, because those are jobs that could be in Indiana, right? It could be in Mississippi. They could be in Virginia. You're taking them out. You're outsourcing your national security to somebody who just openly told you, you know, we don't really care if you have concerns about the compatibility of F-35s and S-400s. We're just telling you this is what we want. Mm-hmm. So if we do not pay attention to these vulnerabilities, America is going to be less safe. And when America is going to be less safe, it's an easy answer for someone to say, you know, let's not send any more kids to the Middle East. That's fine. Iraq maybe was not a core national interest, but there will be a point where there's a core national interest and you're sending American boys and American men and women to die and risk their lives, and you're going to expend American treasure. And at that point, we better have real allies and reliable allies that have our back.
Greg, I would add to what Endy said. To say first, our only, if we get credit on the F-35, it's that we were smart enough to follow Halk's lead and Endy's lead on this. So, number one. Number two, I think ultimately, I think about these things often in terms of our evolution as communities. I think it was a learning experience, and they're like the very common feedback we got when we launched this with Halk was that, listen, if it's Independence Day and you can get some photo ops, you know, at the White House, or if it's something that's a little bit lighter, fine. That's what you guys are good for. But now you're playing with the big boys. This is not millions of dollars. It's not billions of dollars. It is tens and hundreds of billions of dollars. This is not, you know, someone coming to St. Sophia or St. Mary's or whatever. This is Lockheed Martin. And these are the people that in many ways really are the most heavy hitters in American society. So going up against those was, in a sense, punching above our weight. And our community, you know, we have our share of cynics. And I understand and forgive all the cynicism of our world because of our collective worlds, because it's a hard-earned cynicism. We are a bit skeptical about, you know, people who try to oversell themselves. But we shouldn't be cynical of those who are ambitious and reach a little bit beyond their grasp and say, you know, I think this is worth doing, and I think we can do it. And in the end, we started it when nobody else was doing this. That ad was like a watershed. There was no one else on the record attacking this F-35 program and Turkey's participation. And I can't say that we did it ourselves, but I can say that we started the process. And along the way, people joined. You add the Pastor Brunson issue, which is we can talk about, and you add other communities that are concerned, and it built up to the point where the impossible became possible. And I think that's a great education for our community. It's like it's a graduate level seminar on how you can get things done if you are just like really focused and really smart and really persistent. So I guarantee you, in the Turkish Defense Ministry and Foreign Ministry, when this got started, they were laughing and they were like, "Look at those little guys! They think that they can do this. Don't they know anything?" And maybe they know. Maybe they learned something along the way.
Interesting. I want to say that the laughing part. They have one of the think tankers who's still an apologist and probably an unregistered Turkish agent in Washington. Posted the ad the day it came out and said "worst ally ever" is actually the worst hashtag ever, right? But then you saw members of Congress using it. You saw other advocacy groups. We had In Defense of Christians came on board.
Yeah, very good.
American Jewish Committee.
Yep.
All kinds of advocacy groups adopted the worst ally ever. And ultimately, I think that's our strongest critique. They are the worst ally ever. They are the worst ally ever. Yeah, and they're perpetrating a fraud on the American people.
Endy, and that's, I think, something that I have been watching for a long time now. And I follow these issues because I write about them. I publish them on the Pappas Post. But I would sit in not just bewilderment, but amazement. I mean, Aram, I don't know if you were one of the guys that was arrested in Washington, D.C. We watched on live national American television a demonstration in Washington, D.C. a few years ago when the president of Turkey was visiting President Trump, and his goons literally came out and started punching and beating you guys up and throwing things at you. I was watching this on NBC Nightly News thinking, is this happening in my country? Yeah. Are we allowing this foreign dictator's goons to beat up our citizens?
Yeah, Greg, I was actually there. I was at the site, and some of my video got picked up by CNN and NBC and the New York Times, and we provided firsthand witness. We helped the police and the Secret Service and the FBI and all the rest, and then testified before Congress on that point. And I did a live Facebook thing and showed the attack, and then at the end of it, I just started talking, and I wasn't even, to be fair, it wasn't very scripted, and I was just saying what was in my heart more than even my mind at the moment. And the first thought that came to me was, this is sad for America. I felt bad that in my home, that somebody else, a stranger, could come into my home and beat up Americans on American soil in the shadow of the Capitol and in a American park. To this moment, it still gets me. There's a part of me that's very hurt by that.
Excuse me?
No, it was very painful.
Yeah, they were arrested and they were let out.
They were let
out. And to this day, none of the perpetrators have faced justice. But this is, I'll go back to the F-35 and I'll go back to our work in general. I know it's me and Aram being interviewed, but you talked about grassroots, Greg. This has been the great part of our partnership. It's watching the communities come out and young people too. If this year when we protested together at Sheridan Circle across from the Turkish ambassador's residence, I think Aram and I were by far the seniors there, and it was dozens of 20-somethings, and that means that this cause and this fight will continue. But whether it was the F-35, yeah, it was great to put the New York Times ad. The New York Times ad was effective not because of the day that it appeared in the newspaper, but because all of our people were given a copy of that. And when they met with a member of Congress, when they met with their state rep, when they met with somebody, they gave them that ad. That was such an easy handout. They just gave them and it was a powerful movement. And in this one, even though the Department of Justice and the Trump administration let the attackers off, so once again, it's the power of the grassroots in our own community, and someone you know very well. Andreas Zakaris filed a lawsuit, and Turkey tried to get it dismissed. The judge said no. And what we've learned from that lawsuit, and honestly, we should have Andreas on because we've had him on our podcast, but what we've learned from that lawsuit, they didn't just assault American peaceful protesters. Erdogan's security forces pulled guns on the United States Secret Service. Right? These people, somebody's got to be held to account. They're not being held to account, and this is a story. And I know it's American political season, and there will be people who are in the pro-Trump camp, and there'll be people in the anti-Trump camp. But people got to look deep inside themselves. I just criticize Obama, and people know that I helped Obama twice, right? But I'm listening to people in our communities being okay with Mike Flynn getting off, and Mike Flynn, forget about what he pleaded guilty to. There were still other crimes, like not registering as a Turkish agent, right? And people got to, you can back whoever you want, but you got to keep people accountable. And nobody has been held to account for Turkish thugs. And this is not the first time they've done it. They've done it again and again. They did it at the Brookings Institution. They did it at the UN General Assembly, came on American soil and assaulted Americans.
Well, Endy, very, very important point about the election, which is people are going to go the direction they're going to go. They're going to have their favorites and the ones that they don't like. And that's perfectly natural part of our democratic society. But when we speak in our voice, they can be 100% sure that we're going to tell it like it is, not pull any punches, not show any favorites. Listen, take what we're saying, reject it, accept it, let it shape your vote. Maybe it's 5% of your vote. Maybe it's all of your vote. But that's what we're going to say. You can count on us to play it straight, and then people can make their own judgments. But we're not going to start, like you said, like covering up for Michael Flynn, who pocketed $500,000 to write a pro-Erdogan op-ed. I think it got published on Election Day.
On Election Day.
Yeah, nobody gets a free pass on that. Nobody. Democrat, Republican. I should not get a free pass if I do that. No one should. That's where we are. Like, we're going to be the play it straight guys.
Well, and I think that this is a testament to the work that both of you guys are doing. It's not partisan work; it's American work,
yes.
And it's criticizing Obama when Obama needs to be criticized. It's criticizing Trump when Trump needs to be criticized. I think it's equal opportunity criticism, and I think that your work speaks for itself. Do you have your critics? Of course you do. Of course you do. I think it's nice to have critics. I'm on the receiving end of dozens and dozens of critical comments about the work that I do on a daily basis. Speaking of critics, I'd love to hear, and we don't have a lot of time left. We've got about 8 minutes to go, and I did want to ask Aram about Kim Kardashian and Cher, and I don't know if I'm going to have time to. But I follow a lot of interesting people on Twitter, and one of them happens to be the former Consul General of Chicago, the Turkish Consul General of Chicago. What you expect from a diplomat is diplomacy. It's, visit my country. It's beautiful. Here's what you do to get a visa to visit my country, or look at the latest Turkish video about beautiful Turkey, which most of it is Greek sites anyway that they're showing. And I'm sorry in advance for using this language, but this guy called you guys, Andy, he called you a douchebag, didn't he, in his tweet?
He actually called Jonathan Schanzer, who is a think tanker, who is a high-level official at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, who is a friend and I work with. He called him a douchebag.
This is the former Consul General of Turkey to Chicago and a former advisor to the Foreign Ministry on Twitter. If I understand correctly,
he was actually the former chief of staff of Davutoglu when Davutoglu was foreign minister.
Wow.
So he actually tweeted home address, where you work, where you live, which is kind of an insinuation, go out and get them, right?
Yeah, in Turkish, and it was again another analyst who sent it to me, saying, in Turkish, he alerted people that you live and work in Chicago. So, when you're hearing about what Erdogan said yesterday about us, we're kind of used to it. Uh, this consul general, Umut Akar, he had like a tick. He had to at least a couple times a month somehow troll Hulk and say something. Of course, again, to the credit of our grassroots, uh, I have to say, especially some of our young fellows, and I'll call out Thano Davelis and Evan Karambilas, John Vazdekis, Vanessa Camberas. They came out with a hashtag for him, Ted Kutsubis, our favorite Turkish troll. And I think they got under his skin, quite a bit. He started trolling young Greek Americans at 20 years old. But that's not. This is something our community should realize, that this is not an aberration. This Umut Akar.
Yeah.
He does it to us. He called, like you said, he called John Shanzer a douchebag. That's intimidation, trying to again affect the First Amendment by inciting violent feeling in Turkey. He tried to incite violence against two long-time and well-respected Turkish analysts, Stephen Cook and Henri Barkey, who they were giving a presentation at a think tank. Somebody asked him about conspiracy theories regarding the Turkish coup, and Henri, in jest said, "Oh, well, apparently I started one because there is a conspiracy theory about it." And, he debunked the conspiracy theory, but this consul general clipped that moment with a laugh and said these people are laughing about the thousands of or the hundreds of Turks that were killed in the coup. So these are the type of tactics. And, you talk about the report yesterday of what Erdogan said. And somebody who I respect a lot, and I think is someone all of us should be reading, Aykan Erdemir, a former member of parliament in Turkey, someone who's been, awarded for his advocacy for religious freedom, said, Erdogan said this: expect targeting of minorities.
Yeah.
Expect. These are not just words; actions are going to come from it.
Yeah.
Repercussions, and we've seen that, Endy, and you know that. A lot of times these politicians use these, we've seen it in this country, they use their words to incite certain actions from their most extreme followers. They may not go out and say, burn the church, but we see Armenian churches being burned shortly after these words come out of some of these politicians' mouths. We have 3 minutes left. Aram, you were trying.
I just really think you're touching a very, very important point. It's not an accident. It is not an accident that this issue sparked such anger within Turkey. It's not an accident that Erdogan himself condemns the Greek and Armenian lobbies. There's an element of like Edgar Allan Poe and the Telltale Heart. There's a guilty conscience thing going on. They know that our issues speak to the very founding of the Republic, on the graves of millions of Christians, the justice that is still owed to our nations. That's why this is an issue. Why Erdogan gets upset is because this, in some ways, Erdogan believes in the Treaty of Sevres maybe more than anyone else. And this idea of what this will mean for the future of Turkey, they know it has meaning, and that's why they respond so angrily to it. And I think that's just also a sign that we should continue what we're doing.
I've got 2 minutes left. Aram, Kim Kardashian. We have to talk about Kim Kardashian.
She is a great ally, a great friend and ally.
Did you help in coordinating her trip when she went?
We're supportive of everything that she does, but she's also, she's her own boss and she sets her own schedule. But we're there always to support her, to offer advice and guidance and to help out where we can. Let me just offer one quick story for 30 seconds. The Senator Menendez and Cruz have fought the Armenian genocide resolution for 3 consecutive weeks, and they enter the 4th week of trying to bring the measure to a unanimous consent, to get everyone on board. It was the morning of that 4th vote that Kim messaged out through Twitter and Instagram to hundreds of millions of her followers, not a few million, hundreds of millions of followers. And I'm pretty convinced that in the Senate cloakroom, as they were trying to figure out who would come up and take the bullet for, blocking this resolution. I'm sure somebody picked up their cell phone and said, Kardashian's on the record. You want to be on the wrong side of her? And that was I think that was the point where things just broke our way entirely. And she's very tactical and very, very devoted. And there's an awful lot more that she's going to do for the Armenian cause in the coming months and years.
So I want to thank both of you. Our time is up. We've got about a minute left on the countdown clock. And before I go, I will be posting the Facebook pages and the websites of both the Hellenic American Leadership Council, HALC, and the Armenian National Committee of America. I encourage all of you watching to follow their pages, to follow their work. It's not just political. You're both involved in a lot of important humanitarian relief work and other things that come. I want to thank all of our viewers. We've had thousands of people watching, a lot of interesting comments. We will be posting the video to our page. Thank you all for the engaging comments. Thank you, too, for the engaging conversation. Most importantly, I want to thank the hundreds of you who support the Pappas Post. It costs a lot of time, energy, and money to do what we do, to keep our servers going, to keep our articles being published. We have a wonderful team of people called patrons that follow our work. They contribute a very small monthly amount, $5 a month, $10 a month. I'll be posting the link for all of you to become patrons. We need your support to keep going, just like these organizations need your support. Let us keep doing what we're doing, and let us continue being your voice for what's important to you. Endy Zemenides, Aram Hamparian, thank you very much for an engaging hour, and I hope to speak to you guys again very soon.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg.